Call whoever you want, Officer Kyle Denton sneered. Nobody's coming to save a broke scammer like you today. He lifted the check Angela Brooks had placed on the counter and held it high so the entire bank lobby could see it. $300,000? He laughed, shaking his head while customers stared. Women like you don't even see numbers like this unless you're stealing them. The branch manager hovered beside him, nodding eagerly, while a teller stood frozen behind the counter. Phones slowly lifted around the room. Angela kept her shoulders straight, her face calm, and quietly pulled out her phone to dial. Denton leaned closer, grinning as if the whole scene was a joke meant for his entertainment. What he didn't realize was that the person she was calling held the power to erase his badge, his career, and the protection he thought would last forever. Before continuing, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you can't miss. The morning sun streamed through the bank's tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished floor. Angela Brooks stood at the counter, her posture perfect, a testament to her military family upbringing. The check in her hand represented months of work, securing housing for families in need. "Good morning," Angela smiled at Dana Carter, the young teller. "I'd like to deposit this check into the nonprofit account, please." Dana's fingers moved efficiently across her keyboard, but when she scanned the check, her shoulders tensed. Her eyes widened slightly as she stared at the screen. One moment, please, Ms. Brooks. I need to verify something." Angela nodded patiently, though she noticed Dana's hand trembling as she picked up her phone. Behind her, other customers shuffled in line, the usual morning bank crowd growing longer. Within minutes, Harold Mills appeared beside Dana's station. His crisp suit and perfectly knotted tie couldn't hide the slight sheen of sweat on his forehead. He glanced at the check, then at Angela, his lips pressed into a thin line. "Ms. Brooks, there seems to be an issue with this check," Mills announced, his voice unnecessarily loud. "It appears to be fraudulent." The busy lobby grew quieter. Angela felt eyes turning toward her, but she maintained her composure. "There must be some mistake," she said evenly. "This is a legitimate settlement check for our nonprofit housing project. I have all the documentation right here." She reached for her briefcase. "That won't be necessary," Mills cut her off, taking a step back as if her briefcase might contain something dangerous. "We'll need to verify this with the authorities." Angela pulled out her phone. "I can call the foundation right now. They'll confirm everything." "I'm afraid we've already contacted the proper authorities," Mills replied, his voice carrying across the lobby. More customers turned to watch, some pulling out their phones. "I must ask you to remain here until they arrive." The whispers started. Angela caught fragments of conversations. Trying to pass a fake check, and, can you believe it? She stood straight, refusing to let their assumptions affect her dignity. "Mr. Mills," Angela said firmly, "I've been managing this nonprofit's accounts for 3 years. You can easily verify the foundation's information." Mills kept glancing at the front doors, his fingers drumming against the counter. The teller, Dana, looked increasingly uncomfortable, her eyes darting between her screen and her manager. A woman in line whispered to her companion, $300,000? Of course it's suspicious. Angela turned to face the growing crowd. "This is a legitimate settlement check for a housing project helping families in need." Her voice was clear and controlled. "Mr. Mills is refusing to perform basic verification procedures." Mills stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Ms. Brooks, I suggest you calm down." "I am perfectly calm," Angela replied. "You're the one who appears nervous, Mr. Mills." "Why is that?" The manager's face flushed. He tugged at his collar, eyes still fixed on the entrance. The morning sun caught his cufflinks as his hands shook slightly. More phones emerged from the crowd, recording the scene. Angela noticed Dana Carter growing increasingly distressed, her hands hovering over her keyboard as if wanting to type something but afraid to move. The security guard by the door shifted uncomfortably, watching the scene unfold. The morning traffic of customers had almost completely stopped now, everyone focused on the drama at the counter. "Mr. Mills," Angela tried again, "I can provide multiple forms of verification. I have the Foundation's contact information, the settlement documentation, and our nonprofit's registration papers. There's no need for this to escalate. The police will sort this out," Mills announced loudly, making sure everyone in the lobby could hear. But Angela caught the tremor in his voice, saw the way his eyes kept darting to the door. A young man in the crowd spoke up. "Why not just check the Foundation's information?" Mills turned sharply. "Sir, this is a private matter." The distinct sound of sirens cut through the morning air. Mills's shoulders sagged with visible relief. Through the bank's glass doors, Angela watched two patrol cars pull into the parking lot, tires screeching against the asphalt. The vehicles barely stopped before Officers Kyle Denton and Blake Rourke burst out, hands already on their weapons. The bank's double doors flew open with a bang. Officer Denton stormed in first, his face set in an aggressive scowl. Officer Rourke followed close behind, scanning the crowd with narrow eyes. Angela remained perfectly still, her mind racing. The officer's dramatic entrance, Mills's nervous behavior, the refusal to verify the check. Something wasn't right. This felt choreographed, planned. Phones recorded from every angle as the officers approached. Angela noticed Dana Carter slide down slightly in her chair, as if trying to make herself invisible. The morning sun caught the officers' badges as they strode across the lobby, their footsteps echoing off the marble floors. The whispers grew louder. Angela could feel the judgment in the air, the assumptions being made. But she stood her ground, remembering her uncle's words about dignity under fire. Whatever was happening here went beyond a simple banking error. Through the windows, the red and blue lights from the patrol cars continued to flash, casting alternating shadows across the faces of watching customers. The scene was set for a confrontation that would change everything, though not in the way anyone expected. Officer Denton burst through the crowd, his boots pounding against the marble floor. His face was twisted with authority and aggression as he approached Angela at the counter. "Step away from the counter now!" he barked, one hand resting deliberately on his holstered weapon. The command echoed through the suddenly silent lobby. Officer Rourke circled around to Dana the teller, his notepad already out. "Tell me exactly what happened here," he demanded, leaning over the counter intimidatingly. Angela stood her ground, maintaining perfect posture. "Officer, there seems to be a misunderstanding. This is a legitimate settlement check for—" "Did I ask you to speak?" Denton cut her off sharply. He turned to address the watching crowd. "We have a potential fraud situation here, folks. This individual attempted to deposit a suspicious check for over $300,000. "That's completely false," Angela replied evenly. "This is a verified settlement check for a nonprofit housing project. If you'll allow me to show you the documentation—" Denton's hand shot out, gripping Angela's arm roughly. "I said step away from the counter!" He yanked her backward, causing her to stumble slightly. Gasps rippled through the crowd. More phones emerged, recording the escalating scene. A middle-aged woman covered her mouth in shock while her teenage daughter whispered, "This isn't right." "Officer, you're hurting me," Angela stated clearly, her voice carrying to the filming phones. "I'm asking you to verify this check with the issuing nonprofit. Their contact information is right here." She tried to reach for her briefcase with her free hand. "Don't move!" Denton shouted, tightening his grip. "You think we're stupid? That we haven't seen this scam before?" Behind them, Rourke continued interrogating the nervous teller. "Did she threaten you? Make any suspicious statements?" Dana shook her head quickly. "No, sir. She just presented the check and—" And you immediately noticed something was wrong, correct? Rourke pressed, his pen hovering over the notepad. Harold Mills stepped forward, straightening his tie. Yes, our system flagged several concerning indicators. We followed proper procedure by contacting authorities. Angela turned toward Mills, her voice firm despite Denton's grip on her arm. Mr. Mills, you know this is false. You refuse to even attempt verification. I've managed this non-profit account for years. Shut your mouth, Denton snapped, pulling her further from the counter. You're lucky we're just questioning you right now. An elderly man in line spoke up. Officer, maybe you should check her documentation? Sir, stay out of this, Denton barked. This is police business. Everyone needs to stand back. The crowd reluctantly moved away, but their phones remained focused on the scene. The morning sun caught the tears forming in Dana's eyes as she watched Rourke write in his notepad. I want to speak to your supervisor, Angela stated calmly, refusing to be provoked by Denton's aggression. Denton let out a harsh laugh. Oh, you want my supervisor? You think you have some kind of authority here? He gave her arm another rough shake. You're about 10 seconds from being arrested, lady. For what crime? Angela challenged, her voice steady. Attempting to deposit a legitimate check? Or is there another reason you're so eager to prevent this deposit? Denton's face darkened. He grabbed Angela's other arm and began pushing her toward the exit. That's it. You want to play games? Let's take this outside. Officer Denton, Angela pronounced his name clearly for the recording phones, you are assaulting me without cause and preventing a legitimate financial transaction. I suggest you consider your next actions carefully. Are you threatening me? Denton's voice rose dangerously. The veins in his neck stood out as he shoved her closer to the door. You don't make suggestions to me. I'm the one with the badge. Customers pressed against the walls, their faces showing mixed expressions of concern and uncertainty. The security guard looked away, unwilling to intervene. Through the windows, the patrol car's lights continued to flash, creating a strobing effect across the scene. Angela planted her feet firmly, refusing to be pushed further. With deliberate calm, she reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. What do you think you're doing? Denton demanded, his face inches from hers. I'm making a phone call, Angela replied evenly, her fingers moving across the screen. Denton's mouth twisted into a sneering smile. He released her arm and stepped back, spreading his arms wide. Oh, by all means. His voice boomed through the lobby. Call whoever you want. The moment hung in the air as Angela raised the phone to her ear, her eyes locked steadily on Denton's face. The officer's contemptuous grin remained fixed as he played to his audience, clearly enjoying the theatrical moment. Go ahead, he taunted louder, making sure everyone could hear. Call whoever you want. Call the mayor. Call the president. See if I care. Behind him, Officer Rourke smirked, while continuing to write in his notepad. Harold Mills shifted nervously, tugging at his collar. The customers remained frozen, phones recording every second, as Angela calmly waited for her call to connect. The morning sun streamed through the windows, illuminating the tension-filled scene. Angela standing straight and composed, phone to her ear, while Officer Denton loomed over her with his mocking smile, apparently convinced no phone call could possibly challenge his authority. The bank lobby fell silent as Angela calmly pressed the phone to her ear. Sunlight streamed through the glass doors, casting long shadows across the marble floor. Officer Denton stood with his arms crossed, a mocking smile playing on his face as he watched her. "Hello, Uncle Marcus," Angela said clearly, her voice steady despite Denton's looming presence. "I'm at First Capital Bank on Riverside Drive. I'm being falsely arrested for attempting to deposit the settlement check for the housing project." Denton let out an exaggerated laugh, playing to his audience of phone-wielding customers. "Oh, it's Uncle Marcus. I'm so scared now." He turned to Officer Rourke, who chuckled on cue. "Yes, sir. Angela continued, ignoring the theatrics. The officers are refusing to verify the check's legitimacy. Officer Denton has already physically assaulted me and is now threatening arrest without cause. That's enough. Denton's face flushed red. He strode forward and snatched the phone from Angela's hand, his previous amusement hardening into anger. Who exactly do you think you're talking to? A deep, measured voice came through the speaker, clear enough that those nearby could hear its calm authority. General Marcus Whitaker speaking. To whom am I addressing? The change in the room was immediate. Denton's smirk faltered for a fraction of a second. Behind him, Officer Rourke straightened instinctively at the military title. Even Harold Mills, hovering anxiously by his office door, took a small step backward. "This is Officer Kyle Denton," he replied, his voice losing some of its previous swagger. "Badge number 6479, sir." The "sir" slipped out automatically before he could catch himself. "Officer Denton," the general's voice remained perfectly level. "I understand you're detaining my niece. Please explain the probable cause for this arrest." Denton glanced at Angela, who stood watching him with quiet composure. His jaw tightened as he felt the weight of the customers' stares and their recording phones. His pride wouldn't let him back down now, not in front of all these witnesses. "Sir, we're responding to a reported fraudulent check. Bank security protocols were triggered. Have you verified the check's authenticity with the issuing foundation?" the general interrupted. "That's not necessary at this time," Denton replied, his voice rising defensively. "We have probable cause based on the bank's report." "I see," General Whitaker cut him off again. "And your badge number was 6479, correct? At First Capital Bank on Riverside Drive?" "Yes, sir, but—" "And your partner's name and badge number?" Officer Rourke shifted uncomfortably as Denton hesitated. "Officer Blake Rourke," Denton finally answered. "Badge 7123. "Thank you, Officer Denton. That will be all." The line went dead. Denton stood frozen for a moment, staring at the phone. The quiet authority in the general's voice had momentarily transported him back to his military training days. But as he looked up and saw the crowd still watching, still recording, anger flooded back into his face. "All right, show's over," he barked, shoving Angela's phone into his pocket. "Turn off those cameras now. This is a police matter." No one lowered their phones. A teenage girl near the front whispered to her mother, "Did he say he was a general?" Denton's face darkened as he grabbed his handcuffs. "Miss Brooks, put your hands behind your back. You're under arrest for attempted bank fraud and interfering with a police investigation." "Officer Denton," Angela said calmly as he roughly secured the cuffs, "you're making a serious mistake." "No, you made the mistake," he hissed in her ear, tightening the cuffs another notch. "Your uncle can't help you now." The metal bit into Angela's wrists, but she kept her expression neutral. She could feel the eyes of every customer on her as Denton grabbed her arm and began marching her toward the exit. Their phones followed her progress, capturing every moment. Through the glass doors, more patrol cars had arrived, their lights painting the parking lot in strobing red and blue. The morning had grown hot, and heat waves shimmered off the police cruisers' hoods. "Watch your head," Denton sneered as he pushed Angela toward the nearest vehicle. The words were for the benefit of the witnesses now clustering at the bank's entrance, still filming. Officer Rourke hurried out behind them, speaking quietly into his radio. His earlier confidence had evaporated, replaced by nervous energy as he kept glancing over his shoulder. Harold Mills stood in the doorway, pulling anxiously at his tie. The morning sun caught the sweat beading on his forehead. As Angela was pushed into the back seat of the patrol car, she noticed his expression wasn't one of satisfaction or vindication. It was pure fear. The car door slammed shut with a heavy finality. Through the window, Angela could see the crowd of customers still recording, their phones raised like silent witnesses. Some wore expressions of concern, others of confusion, but all of them knew they had just witnessed something significant. Denton climbed into the driver's seat, his movements sharp with suppressed anger. "Your uncle being a general doesn't change anything," he said, gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. "You're still going to jail." Angela sat quietly in the back seat, maintaining her dignified composure despite the handcuffs. As the patrol car pulled away from the curb, she watched the bank recede in the window, its glass facade reflecting the morning sun like a mirror. The customers remained clustered at the entrance, their phones still raised, recording the car's departure. The patrol car's engine rumbled as Officer Denton pulled away from the curb, leaving behind a crowd of witnesses with their phones still raised. Angela sat straight-backed in the rear seat despite the uncomfortable handcuffs. Her professional demeanor, a stark contrast to Denton's barely contained rage. "You think dropping a general's name is going to help you?" Denton's eyes found hers in the rearview mirror. "This isn't the Army. Your uncle's stars don't mean anything here." Officer Rourke shifted nervously in the passenger seat, checking his phone. "Maybe we should verify the check with—" "Shut up," Denton snapped. "We're handling this by the book." Angela studied their interaction, noting how Rourke immediately fell silent. The dynamic between them seemed practiced. Denton the aggressor, Rourke the anxious follower. She filed away this detail as the car wound through suburban streets lined with manicured lawns and expensive homes. "Harold's never wrong about these things," Rourke muttered, almost to himself. "If he says it's fraud—" Angela's attention sharpened. Harold, not Mr. Mills, not the bank manager. The casual use of his first name hung in the air like a red flag. "I said shut it," Denton growled, but Angela had already caught the slip. These officers knew the bank manager personally, well enough to use his first name. The radio crackled to life, cutting through the tension. "Dispatch to Unit 647. Please respond." Denton ignored it, pressing down harder on the accelerator. "Unit 647. We have inquiries from command about your current arrest status. Please confirm nature of charges and verification procedures followed." Angela watched Denton's knuckles whiten on the steering wheel. The muscle in his jaw twitched as he reached over and turned the radio volume down to a whisper. "They're going to keep asking," Rourke said quietly. "Let them ask." Denton took a corner too fast, making the tires squeal. "By the time we process her, it won't matter." Angela's mind worked quickly, assembling the pieces, the bank manager's nervousness, the officer's immediate arrival, their familiarity with Harold Mills, the rushed arrest before the check could be verified. This wasn't random harassment. This was coordinated. The radio squawked again, louder this time despite the lowered volume. "Unit 647. Be advised we're receiving calls from the Chief's office regarding your current detention. Immediate response required." Denton slammed his hand against the radio, silencing it completely. "Your uncle works fast," he sneered at Angela. "But paperwork takes time. Booking takes time. Computer systems go down sometimes. Lots of things can happen." "Is that a threat, Officer Denton?" Angela kept her voice steady, professional. "Or are you explaining how you and Harold usually handle these situations?" The car swerved slightly as Denton's head whipped around. "What did you say?" "Kyle," Rourke warned, glancing nervously at passing traffic. "Don't." Angela noted another piece of the puzzle. Rourke used Denton's first name, too. These weren't just patrol partners. This was something more familiar. "I'm simply curious about your relationship with the bank manager," Angela continued calmly. "You seem to know each other well. I wonder how many other customers have had similar experiences." "You don't know what you're talking about," Denton said, but his voice had lost some of its swagger. The radio crackled again, this time from Rourke's shoulder unit. "All units be advised. Command is requesting immediate verification of arrest at First Capital Bank. Unit 647, respond immediately. Rourke reached for his radio, but Denton knocked his hand away. Touch that, and you're walking back to the station. Angela watched the city landscape change through the window, moving from residential areas to commercial streets. They were taking a longer route to the precinct than necessary, buying time for something. But for what? The check would have been verified eventually, Angela said, thinking out loud. The non-profit's records are public. Unless… She paused, remembering the manager's terrified expression. Unless verification wasn't what you were worried about. One more word, Denton threatened, and I'll add resisting arrest to the charges. But Angela could see it clearly now. Her attempt to deposit the settlement check had triggered something. Not because the check was suspicious, but because its legitimate processing would have exposed something else. Something in the bank's records. Something that required immediate intervention. The patrol car finally turned into the precinct parking lot, rolling past rows of police vehicles. 3 ranking officers stood waiting by the entrance, their expressions stern. Denton cursed under his breath. They know, Rourke whispered, panic creeping into his voice. They have to know. They don't know anything, Denton insisted, but his face had lost color. He parked haphazardly across 2 spaces and got out, yanking open the rear door. The radio made one final attempt. Unit 647. Command requires immediate explanation of arrest protocol violation and… Denton reached in and roughly pulled Angela from the back seat, ignoring the blaring radio. She maintained her dignified posture despite his grip on her arm, walking steadily toward the station entrance where the senior officers waited. "Officer Denton," one of them called out. "Release Ms. Brooks immediately and report to my office." "Sir, I can explain," Denton started, but his voice had lost all its previous authority. The bank manager confirmed. "That wasn't a request, officer." The commanding officer's voice cut through the parking lot like steel. "Release her. Now." The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead in the precinct's booking area, casting harsh shadows across the institutional gray walls. Angela sat perfectly straight in the hard plastic chair, her wrists still bound by handcuffs, watching Officer Denton furiously scribble on arrest forms at the processing desk. His earlier swagger had diminished, replaced by tight-lipped determination, as he documented his version of events. "Type of offense, attempted bank fraud," he muttered while typing into the computer. "Subject presented suspicious documentation." "That's completely false," Angela stated firmly. "And you know it." Denton's fingers paused over the keyboard. "You really should stay quiet until your lawyer arrives." His tone dripped with false concern. "Everything you say can and will be used." The front doors of the precinct slammed open with military precision. The sound echoed through the booking area like a thunderclap, causing several officers to jump. General Marcus Whitaker stood in the entrance, his 4-star uniform immaculate, his presence immediately commanding every eye in the room. He removed his service cap with deliberate slowness, tucking it under his arm as he surveyed the scene. "I believe," the general said, in a quiet voice that somehow filled the entire space, "someone needs to explain why my niece is in handcuffs." The booking officers straightened instinctively, responding to the natural authority in his bearing. Denton's face had gone pale, but he tried to maintain his professional facade as he stood. "Sir, I'm Officer Denton. I was simply processing an arrest for…" "Your badge number, officer." The general's tone was precise, measured. "Sir?" "Your badge number," General Whitaker repeated, taking one step forward. "Along with your partners, and the name of your supervising officer." "Now." Denton swallowed hard. "Badge 647, sir. Partner is 648. Captain Reynolds is our… Get him here." The general didn't raise his voice, but the nearest officer immediately scrambled for a phone. Angela watched her uncle's calculated approach. He moved with the contained energy of someone used to controlling crisis situations, each step purposeful as he crossed to the booking desk. His eyes scanned every detail, the half-completed arrest forms, the nervous postures of the staff, the way Denton's hand shook slightly as he held the paperwork. "Now," the general continued, "you will explain to me, in exact detail, the probable cause for this arrest. Begin with your presence at the bank. Why were you there? We received a call about suspected fraud. From whom specifically?" "The branch manager, Harold Mills." "And what evidence did Mr. Mills provide to support this suspicion?" Denton shifted uncomfortably. "He stated the check appeared irregular." "In what way?" The general's questions came like precise tactical strikes. "What specific irregularities?" "Sir, Denton stumbled. The amount was unusually large. "Is there a legal limit on check amounts I'm unaware of?" The general turned to address the room at large. "Does size alone constitute fraud?" No one answered. The silence was broken by heavy footsteps as Captain Reynolds hurried into the booking area, his face already sheened with nervous sweat. "General Whitaker," the captain said, trying to project authority while clearly intimidated. "I understand there's been a situation—" "There has, indeed." The general didn't turn around. "Your officer arrested a respected financial consultant without probable cause, refused to verify easily confirmable documentation, and ignored multiple requests from dispatch for explanation. I want to know why." Captain Reynolds tugged at his collar. "We take fraud allegations very seriously." "As do federal banking regulators," the general interrupted smoothly, "who are now quite interested in this incident." The captain's face went ash-gray. "Federal regulators?" "The attempted deposit was a settlement check for a federally funded housing project," Angela explained calmly, still sitting straight despite the handcuffs. All documentation was present, including the nonprofit's federal ID number and project authorization codes. The bank manager refused to even look at them before calling the police. "Which suggests," the general added, "either gross incompetence or deliberate obstruction. Neither reflects well on your department's relationship with this particular bank branch." Denton's earlier bravado had completely evaporated. He stared at his half-completed paperwork as if it might explode. "Remove those handcuffs," Captain Reynolds ordered quickly. "Now." As a junior officer fumbled with the keys, Angela's phone buzzed in the property bag on the booking desk. The general retrieved it and handed it to her as she rubbed her freed wrists. "It's Tasha," Angela said, reading the screen. She answered and listened intently, her expression growing more concerned with each passing second. "Are you certain? How many instances?" "Yes, I understand. No, don't do anything yet. I'll call you back." She ended the call and met her uncle's questioning look. "That was my sister," she explained. "She's been reviewing financial records related to the settlement funds. She's found multiple irregularities, small amounts missing from various nonprofit deposits over the past year, all processed through the same bank branch." The general's eyes narrowed slightly as he turned back to Captain Reynolds. "It seems this situation requires a much deeper investigation than a simple fraud allegation." The captain nodded quickly, sweat now visibly staining his uniform. "Of course, we'll cooperate fully." "I should hope so," the general said, "because I suspect this is only the beginning of a much larger problem." He placed his service cap back on with precise movements. "I suggest you secure all relevant documentation immediately. I have a feeling several agencies will be very interested in reviewing it." The soft glow of Angela's laptop illuminated 3 intent faces in her living room. Documents and financial records lay scattered across her coffee table like puzzle pieces waiting to be assembled. Angela sat cross-legged on her couch, scrolling through spreadsheets while General Whitaker stood behind her. hands clasped behind his back in his characteristic military posture. Tasha paced the room, her legal pad covered in scribbled notes. "Look at this pattern," Tasha said, stopping to point at the screen. "Every nonprofit deposit over $50,000 shows discrepancies, small amounts vanishing between initial processing and final posting." Angela leaned forward, her expression tightening. "How much are we talking about?" "It varies. 2,000 here, 3,000 there." Tasha flipped through her notes. "Never enough to raise immediate red flags. But when you add it up across multiple organizations over the past year..." She wrote a figure on her pad and showed it to them. The general's eyebrows rose slightly. "That's a significant sum. And these are just the ones we've confirmed so far," Tasha continued. "All processed through Mills's branch. The money disappears during what they label as administrative holds, completely unnecessary delays they created to manipulate the accounts." Angela rubbed her temples, remembering the manager's nervous behavior. "My deposit would have blown their cover. $320,000. They couldn't hide those numbers in their usual way without someone noticing." "Exactly," Tasha said, resuming her pacing. "They needed to stop that check from being processed. That's why Mills called his police friends so quickly. They couldn't risk normal verification procedures." The general moved to the window, looking out at the darkening street. "The question is, where did the money go?" "I've traced some of it through a series of shell accounts," Tasha explained, rifling through more papers. "But they're careful. The transfers are fragmented, bounced between multiple accounts before disappearing completely." Angela clicked through another spreadsheet, her finger tracing patterns in the numbers. "Wait, look at these timestamps." She highlighted several rows. "The transfers always happen during the night shift, when regular staff isn't around, giving them privacy to manipulate the system," the general noted. "Who has access during those hours?" "Mills would," Tasha said. "As branch manager, he has override authority. And the security logs show frequent late-night entries, always explained as routine audits." Across town, in the dimly lit back office of the bank branch, a very different meeting was taking place. Harold Mills sat behind his desk, his normally pristine shirt wrinkled, his face drawn with stress. Officers Denton and Rourke stood before him, still in uniform despite the late hour. "They're going to find everything," Mills whispered, tugging at his collar. "That lawyer is already tracking the transfers." "Calm down," Denton snapped, though his own voice carried an edge of panic. "Nothing's traced back to us yet." "Yet!" Mills's voice cracked. "It's only a matter of time. That general probably has federal agents combing through every transaction by now." Rourke paced nervously. "We need to clean house. Tonight." "The records," Mills started. "Show us where they are," Denton demanded. "All of them. Physical and digital." Mills's hand shook as he pulled out his keys. "The backup files are in the secure storage room. But we can't just delete everything. Questions will..." "We're way past worrying about questions," Denton cut him off. "Show us, now." The bank's fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows as they moved through the empty building. Their footsteps echoed in the silence, while Mills led them to a reinforced door marked Secure Storage. Inside, rows of filing cabinets lined the walls, and a small server hummed in the corner. "The transaction records are in these cabinets," Mills indicated with trembling fingers. "The server contains backup data and security footage." "Start with the paper files," Denton ordered, pulling out empty boxes they'd brought. "Everything from the past 18 months. Rourke, grab the hard drives." They worked quickly, Mills's hands shaking as he pulled folders while Rourke disconnected storage devices. Denton stood watch at the door, checking his phone repeatedly. "Hurry up," he hissed. "We need to be gone before the midnight security sweep." "There's so much," Mills whispered. "We'll never get it all." "We get what matters," Denton snapped. "The transfer records, the override logs, anything showing the account manipulations." The minutes ticked by as they loaded box after box. Sweat stained Mills's shirt dark as he passed folders to Denton, who stacked them efficiently. Rourke wrapped hard drives in bubble wrap, tucking them carefully into padded cases. "That's the last of the critical files," Mills said finally, closing an empty drawer. "The server," Denton demanded. "Wiped and overwritten," Rourke confirmed. "They won't recover anything useful." They carried their cargo through the silent bank, Mills disabling security cameras as they went. At the back entrance, Denton and Rourke's patrol car waited in the shadows, trunk open. What they didn't notice was Marcus Johnson, the night security guard, watching from his booth across the parking lot. He'd been suspicious of the branch manager's frequent late visits, and tonight's activity with uniformed officers set off every warning bell in his 20 years of security experience. As the officers loaded box after box into their cruiser, Johnson quietly took photos with his phone. He noted the time, the patrol car's number, and the way they kept checking over their shoulders. When they finally drove away, he looked down at his phone, where an email from an anonymous tip line glowed on the screen. His finger hovered over the send button. The security guard thought about his daughter, who worked at a nonprofit downtown. She'd mentioned funding delays recently, money that seemed to vanish into administrative black holes. His jaw tightened as he attached the photos and pressed send. The city slept under a blanket of streetlights, peaceful except for the loading area behind First Regional Bank. Officer Denton slammed another box into the cruiser's trunk, his movements sharp with urgency. Sweat darkened his uniform despite the cool night air. "Faster!" he barked at Rourke, who stumbled under the weight of more files. "We need to clear out before anyone notices." Their patrol car sat in the shadows, trunk and back doors open wide to swallow evidence of their scheme. Paper rustled as they crammed folders into every available space. The bank manager, Mills, hovered nearby, wringing his hands. "That's everything critical," Mills whispered. "But what if they—" "Shut up," Denton snapped, scanning the empty parking lot. "Just get back inside and make sure the security footage is wiped." Mills scurried away while Rourke stuffed the last box behind the front seats. The radio suddenly crackled to life, making them both jump. "Dispatch to all units. Reports of suspicious activity at First Regional Bank on Madison. Any units in the area, please respond." Denton froze, his hand still on the trunk lid. Rourke's face went pale. "Someone called it in," Rourke hissed. "We need to— Get in!" Denton shoved him toward the passenger door. The trunk slammed shut as red and blue lights flickered in the distance, reflecting off building windows. Denton threw himself behind the wheel and fired up the engine. His fingers fumbled with the radio dial, switching it off before more calls could come through. The cruiser's headlights stayed dark as he eased it around the building. 2 patrol cars turned onto their street, lights flashing. Denton's knuckles went white on the steering wheel. Instead of stopping, he stomped the gas pedal. The cruiser shot forward, tires squealing on asphalt. "What are you doing?" Rourke clutched the dashboard as they fishtailed onto the main road. "We can't run!" "They catch us now. It's over." Denton yanked the wheel, cutting through a gas station lot. Sirens wailed behind them as more units joined the pursuit. The cruiser burst onto the highway entrance ramp, engine roaring. At this hour, traffic was sparse, perfect for a high-speed chase. Denton weaved between the few cars on the road, ignoring Rourke's panicked cursing. "The documents!" Denton commanded, swerving around a truck. "Start destroying everything!" Rourke twisted in his seat, grabbing folders from the back. Papers flew as he tore them to shreds, letting the pieces flutter in the wind from his cracked window. The pursuing officers gained ground, their sirens growing louder. The speedometer crept past 90 as they raced down the empty highway. Denton's eyes darted between the road and his mirrors, counting at least 4 units behind them now. His police radio would be exploding with activity, but the silence in their cruiser was broken only by ripping paper and Rourke's ragged breathing. "Faster!" Rourke urged as he fed another stack of documents through Mills's portable shredder. "They're getting closer!" Denton took the next exit at full speed, the cruiser tilting dangerously. They shot through red lights, sending the few late-night drivers swerving to avoid them. The city streets were a maze of sharp turns and sudden obstacles. A police SUV tried to cut them off at an intersection. Denton yanked the wheel hard, mounting the sidewalk in a shower of sparks. The pursuit cars scattered, regrouping behind them as they rejoined the street. "The hard drives!" Denton shouted as they bounced through a construction zone. "We can't let them get those!" Rourke dug through the boxes, finding the wrapped drives. He smashed them against the dashboard repeatedly, plastic cracking and circuits breaking. Pieces joined the paper fragments, swirling out the window. Their route took them deeper into the industrial district. Empty warehouses loomed on either side, their windows dark and accusing. Metal gates and loading docks created an obstacle course in the beam of their headlights. The cruiser's engine whined in protest as Denton pushed it harder. They clipped a dumpster, the impact sending more boxes tumbling. Evidence scattered across the floor as they fishtailed around another corner. "They're calling in air support!" Rourke's voice cracked as he spotted helicopter lights in the distance. "We need to get off the streets!" Denton's eyes darted between buildings, searching. The industrial district was a warren of storage facilities and abandoned factories. Somewhere in this concrete maze was their only chance of escape. The pursuit units maintained their distance, lights painting everything in red and blue strobes. More sirens joined the chorus as additional officers converged on their location. The net was closing. Rourke continued destroying evidence, his movements increasingly frantic. Shredded papers and broken hardware littered the cruiser's interior. But boxes of damning documents remained, too many to eliminate before they were caught. Their headlights illuminated a "no outlet" sign as they turned down another service road. Warehouses pressed in on both sides, their metal walls reflecting police lights like a disco nightmare. The helicopter's spotlight swept the street ahead of them. Denton's jaw clenched as he recognized where they were. The oldest part of the industrial district, where abandoned buildings stood like forgotten sentinels. The cruiser's engine echoed off crumbling walls as they plunged deeper into the maze of empty streets. Angela gripped the armrest as federal investigator Reyes sped through the empty streets, their unmarked cars' lights flashing. Radio chatter filled the vehicle, documenting the desperate chase unfolding ahead of them. "Suspect vehicle heading east on Industrial Boulevard," a dispatcher reported. "Multiple units in pursuit." Through the windshield, Angela caught glimpses of emergency lights reflecting off warehouse walls. The industrial district stretched before them like a maze of concrete and steel, dark except for the strobing police lights painting everything in red and blue. "They're destroying evidence," Reyes said grimly, taking a corner at high speed. "Units report papers being thrown from the vehicle." Angela's stomach tightened. Those documents could prove the corruption she'd suspected since her arrest. "Can we get ahead of them?" "Working on it." Reyes pressed the accelerator as they passed abandoned loading docks and empty rail cars. The pursuit had scattered across several blocks, patrol units trying to box in Denton's cruiser. A helicopter's spotlight swept across their path, illuminating broken windows and graffiti-covered walls. The whump-whump of rotor blades echoed off buildings as they followed the air unit's guidance. "All units be advised," the radio crackled. "Suspects entering warehouse district via Marshall Street." They rounded a corner in time to see Denton's cruiser fishtail through an intersection ahead. Sparks showered from its undercarriage as it bottomed out on broken pavement. Other police vehicles followed. their sirens creating a deafening chorus in the confined space. "He's going to get someone killed," Angela muttered, watching Denton narrowly miss a concrete barrier. The chase wound deeper into the industrial zone. Ancient warehouses loomed over narrow service roads designed for delivery trucks, not high-speed pursuits. Metal debris littered the ground, threatening tires and suspension systems. Reyes maintained a careful distance, letting patrol units handle the direct pursuit while they followed the chaos. Papers swirled in their headlights. Shredded documents that had fluttered from Denton's vehicle. "Suspect turning north toward the rail yard," dispatch updated. "Be advised, multiple civilian vehicles in the area." Angela spotted the headlights of late-night maintenance trucks scattered among the warehouses. Workers dove for cover as Denton's cruiser screamed past their positions. The pursuing officers were forced to slow, creating gaps in their formation. "He's heading for the old storage complex," Reyes said, recognizing the route. "Lots of hiding places in there." The storage complex appeared ahead, a sprawling maze of interconnected warehouses dating back decades. Most units stood empty, their loading bays sealed with rusted chains. Perfect territory for someone looking to disappear. A tremendous crash echoed through the night. Angela jerked forward against her seatbelt as they rounded the final corner. Denton's cruiser had plowed through a chain-link security gate, leaving it twisted and sparking. Patrol cars scattered to avoid the debris. "All units, suspects, have breached the perimeter," dispatch announced. "Form containment around Building 7. They watched Denton's vehicle careen through the storage yard, bouncing off concrete pylons. The cruiser's front end was crushed, steam rising from the damaged radiator. It wouldn't last much longer at this pace. Sure enough, the vehicle suddenly swerved toward a massive warehouse entrance. Metal doors stood partially open, revealing darkness beyond. The cruiser skidded to a stop in a shower of sparks and smoke. "Suspects bailing on foot!" an officer shouted over the radio. "They're carrying boxes into the building." Angela could just make out two figures rushing through the warehouse doors, arms full of evidence, more papers scattered in their wake, carried by the wind. Reyes brought their vehicle to a stop as other units formed a perimeter. Officers poured from their cars, weapons drawn. The helicopter spotlight fixed on the warehouse entrance, turning night into day. "Stay in the car," Reyes ordered, checking his weapon. "We don't know if they're armed." Angela watched tactical units arrive, officers in heavy gear moving to surround the building. The warehouse complex was a tactical nightmare. Multiple levels, countless hiding spots, and numerous possible escape routes through the connecting structures. "Suspects observed on second floor," the helicopter crew reported, "moving east through the building." More police vehicles arrived, their lights painting the scene in chaos. Angela spotted Denton's abandoned cruiser, its doors hanging open. Shredded papers and broken electronics littered the ground around it. They'd destroyed as much evidence as possible during the chase. "This is the police!" a commanding voice boomed through a megaphone. "The building is surrounded. Come out with your hands up." Only silence answered. The helicopter circled overhead, its spotlight probing broken windows for movement. Officers maintained their positions, weapons trained on every possible exit. "They're not coming out," Angela said quietly. After everything she'd seen, she knew Denton would rather fight than surrender. Reyes nodded grimly. "SWAT's on the way. We'll clear it floor by floor if we have to." Angela studied the warehouse's facade. Decades of neglect had left it scarred and crumbling. Any evidence inside could be destroyed long before officers reached it. The truth about the corruption she'd uncovered might literally go up in flames. The standoff continued as more units arrived. Floodlights now bathed the building in harsh illumination, eliminating shadows where suspects might hide. Officers coordinated positions through radio calls, preparing for whatever came next. Angela sat in tense silence, watching the scene unfold. Everything that had started with her arrest at the bank had led to this moment. Somewhere in that warehouse, Denton and Rourke were cornered with proof of their crimes. The only question was how far they would go to keep their secrets hidden. Floodlights cast harsh shadows across the warehouse's weathered facade, while dozens of officers maintained their positions. The helicopter's spotlight swept methodically over broken windows and rusted metal doors. Through a megaphone, commands echoed off surrounding buildings. "This is your final warning. Come out with your hands up." Angela watched from the passenger seat of Reyes's vehicle as SWAT teams assembled in formation. Officers in tactical gear checked weapons and communications equipment while discussing entry points. The night air carried the metallic click of rifles being readied. "Movement on the second floor," the helicopter crew reported. "East side, near the loading crane." Through the warehouse's grimy windows, shadows danced in the artificial light. A dull orange glow began to flicker behind the glass. Angela leaned forward, squinting at the strange illumination. "Is that fire?" she asked. Reyes grabbed his radio. "Possible fire inside the structure. All units be advised." The orange glow intensified. Smoke began seeping through broken windows and gaps in the metal siding. Inside, the distinct sound of gunshots cracked through the night air. Officers dove for cover as bullets punched through windows. "Shots fired! Shots fired!" Multiple voices called over the radio. SWAT teams rushed the building's main entrance, shields raised. More gunfire erupted from inside, forcing them back. Bullets sparked off concrete and metal, while officers scrambled to safety. The helicopter's spotlight tracked muzzle flashes through the windows. "We need fire units here now!" Reyes shouted into his radio. Thick black smoke now poured from the upper floors. Angela's hands clenched into fists. "They're burning everything," she said. All the evidence that could expose the corruption was going up in flames. Inside the warehouse, the crack of gunfire continued sporadically. Officers maintained their positions, unable to advance through the barrage. The smoke grew thicker, reducing visibility around the building. Emergency lights painted the rising clouds in shifting red and blue patterns. A sudden explosion rocked the warehouse. Glass shattered outward as a barrel of burning documents detonated, spraying embers into the night sky. The helicopter's spotlight caught the cascade of burning paper drifting through the air like deadly snow. "Movement at the rear loading dock!" an officer shouted. "Two suspects heading for a delivery truck." Angela spotted them through the smoke. Denton and Rourke sprinting toward a white box truck parked behind the building. They must have arranged it as an escape vehicle. Officers opened fire, but the suspects disappeared behind the vehicle. "Stop that truck!" Reyes ordered, but it was too late. The delivery truck's engine roared to life. Its tires squealed against pavement as it accelerated toward a gap in the police perimeter. Officers scrambled to move their vehicles, but the truck smashed through their makeshift barricade. Within seconds, it vanished into the maze of industrial streets. Suspects fleeing in white delivery truck, heading west. Multiple units broke off to pursue the escaping vehicle. Inside the warehouse, the fire spread rapidly through decades of dust and debris. Flames licked up old wooden support beams, while toxic smoke filled the structure. The heat became intense enough to force officers back from their positions. "Fire department en route," dispatch announced. "All units clear the building." Reyes grabbed his protective vest from the back seat. "Stay here," he ordered Angela. "We need to see what evidence survived." She watched him join a team of investigators rushing toward the warehouse entrance. The fire had consumed most of the upper floors, but the ground level remained partially accessible. Flashlight beams cut through the smoke as officers searched for surviving documents. Emergency vehicles arrived with sirens screaming. Firefighters deployed hoses, while investigators rushed to recover anything that hadn't burned. Through breaks in the smoke, Angela could see them gathering scattered papers and charred file boxes. The fire department brought the blaze under control, but the damage was done. Most of the warehouse's contents had been reduced to ash. The few documents that survived were badly damaged by smoke and water. Investigators emerged from the building looking defeated, carrying evidence bags that contained more soot than paper. Reyes returned to the car, his face grim beneath a layer of soot. "They destroyed almost everything," he reported. "Found the remains of several barrels they used to burn files. Whatever was in those documents, they made sure we'll never know." Angela felt her heart sink. All the proof of the bank fraud, the stolen non-profit funds, the officers' corruption, gone. She watched firefighters spray water through broken windows while investigators photographed the scene. The truth had literally gone up in smoke. "What about the truck?" she asked. "Did they catch them?" Reyes shook his head. "Lost them in the industrial district. Too many side streets and warehouses. They probably had the route planned." More evidence teams arrived to search the burned structure. The helicopter circled overhead, its spotlight now helping firefighters identify hot spots. The air reeked of smoke and melted plastic. Years of financial records and illegal schemes had been reduced to floating ash. Angela stared at the ruined warehouse while emergency crews worked. The investigation that started with her wrongful arrest seemed to be collapsing. Without those documents, proving the corruption would be nearly impossible. Denton and Rourke had escaped with their secrets, leaving only destruction behind. The first hints of dawn appeared on the horizon as firefighters declared the scene contained. The warehouse stood as a blackened shell, water cascading from its broken windows. Evidence teams continued their grim task, sifting through debris for anything that might have survived. But the expressions on their faces told Angela they were finding nothing but ashes. The makeshift command center hummed with activity as dawn broke over the industrial district. Fold-out tables crowded with laptops and evidence bags filled the old office space adjacent to the burned warehouse. Coffee cups and energy drink cans littered every surface, while exhausted investigators pored over scorched documents. Angela sat beside her sister Tasha, both women fighting fatigue after the long night. Across from them, Federal Investigator Reyes coordinated with evidence technicians who continued processing the scene. The acrid smell of smoke still clung to their clothes. "Got something?" An evidence tech burst through the door, carefully carrying a metal box. Hidden safe behind a false wall, the fire didn't reach it. Reyes immediately cleared space on the nearest table. The tech set down the box and began photographing it from every angle. Inside they found stacks of partially melted USB drives, a laptop warped by heat, and an external hard drive that appeared largely intact. "Please tell me that's recoverable," Angela said, leaning forward to examine the device. "We'll know soon." Tasha pulled out her phone. "I'm calling our cyber forensics team. They can start working on it right away." Within an hour, federal tech specialists had the hard drive connected to their systems. Lines of code scrolled across multiple screens, while programs attempted to bypass encryption and recover damaged files. The tension in the room grew with each passing minute. "There!" One specialist pointed to his screen. "Getting through the first layer of security. These guys tried to hide their tracks, but they weren't exactly tech experts." Angela watched as financial records began populating the screens. Account numbers, transfer dates, detailed spreadsheets tracking what appeared to be millions in stolen funds. Tasha grabbed a legal pad and began taking rapid notes. "Look at these patterns," she said, highlighting entries. Small amounts siphoned from dozens of nonprofit deposits, then routed through shell accounts. The bank manager Mills signed off on every transaction. Reyes studied the data over her shoulder. "And there's our connection to Denton and Rourke. Their badge numbers are coded into these authorization fields. They were running security for the whole operation." More files emerged as the decryption continued. Property records, warehouse rental agreements, and delivery schedules painted a picture of a sophisticated criminal enterprise. The corrupt officers hadn't just been stealing from Angela's nonprofit. They'd been targeting vulnerable organizations across the city. Wait, go back to that address. Angela pointed at a lease agreement. That warehouse on River Street. The transfer dates match when large amounts of cash were moved. Tasha pulled up satellite imagery of the location. Industrial storage facility, minimal security cameras, easy access to the highway. Perfect place to store illegal funds before moving them. And look at this. Reyes highlighted a recent entry. Large withdrawal authorized yesterday, right before Denton and Rourke fled. They're planning to clean out their reserves and disappear. Angela stood up, pacing the room as anger and determination fought exhaustion. We can't let them get away with this. Those funds were meant to help people in need. Families waiting for affordable housing, community programs that desperately need resources. We won't, Reyes assured her. He was already coordinating with tactical teams. But we need to move fast. That withdrawal means they're preparing to run. Surveillance photos began arriving from federal agents watching the River Street warehouse. Multiple vehicles had arrived throughout the night. Armed guards patrolled the perimeter, while boxes were loaded into unmarked vans. They're clearing everything out, Tasha observed. Once that money's gone, proving the conspiracy gets much harder. Then we stop them now. Angela's voice was firm. I want to be there when you take that warehouse. I need to see the truth about this corruption with my own eyes. Reyes shook his head. It's too dangerous. These guys are desperate and heavily armed. This needs to be a tactical operation. With all due respect, Angela met his gaze. I've already faced their guns and intimidation. They tried to destroy my reputation and steal from people who trusted me. I won't hide while others fight my battle. Tasha touched her sister's arm. Angela's right. She deserves to see justice done. And her financial expertise could help us identify critical evidence before they destroy it. After a long moment, Reyes nodded. You'll stay with the command unit, well back from any conflict. But first, we need to move quickly and quietly. Element of surprise is critical. The next hour was a blur of tactical planning and coordination. Surveillance confirmed at least 8 armed guards at the warehouse, with Denton and Rourke likely inside. Blueprints were studied, entry points identified, and tactical teams assembled. Angela watched federal agents gear up, checking weapons and communications equipment. Body armor was distributed, while team leaders reviewed their assignments. The eastern sky grew steadily lighter, adding urgency to their preparations. Dawn raid gives us optimal visibility and catches them tired after a long night, Reyes explained as they finalized the plan. Multiple teams will breach simultaneously from all sides. Main priority is securing suspects and preventing evidence destruction. Tasha helped Angela put on a protective vest, tightening the straps. Stay close to me and follow instructions exactly, she insisted. These guys are cornered and desperate. That makes them extremely dangerous. Through the command center windows, Angela watched tactical units load into unmarked vehicles. The morning air was cool and damp as teams began moving into position around the target warehouse. Everything felt surreal. Less than 24 hours ago, she'd been trying to make a simple bank deposit. Now she was part of a federal raid to expose corruption that went deeper than anyone suspected. All teams in position, crackled the radio, awaiting execute order. Reyes checked his watch and nodded to the sisters. It's time. Let's go end this. They moved quickly to their assigned vehicle, joining the convoy heading toward River Street. The rising sun painted the city in shades of gold and shadow. Somewhere ahead, corrupt officers who thought they were untouchable were about to learn a harsh lesson about justice. The pre-dawn air hung heavy with fog as federal vehicles positioned themselves silently around the River Street warehouse. Sodium lights cast an eerie orange glow through the mist, creating shifting shadows against the building's corrugated metal walls. Angela crouched beside Tasha in the command vehicle, watching tactical teams move into position through night vision monitors. "Alpha team in position. East entrance," whispered a voice through the radio. "Bravo team ready. Loading dock secured," came another response. "Charlie team covering rear exit." Federal investigator Reyes studied the thermal imaging displays showing multiple heat signatures inside the warehouse. Red and orange blobs moved between stacks of crates, confirming at least 8 armed guards patrolling the interior. 2 figures paced nervously in what appeared to be an office area. "That's got to be Denton and Rourke," Tasha pointed to the isolated heat signatures. "They're probably counting their money one last time before running." Angela's hands tightened into fists as she watched the screens. The warehouse looked massive from outside, row after row of metal storage units filled with who knew how many millions in stolen funds. Years of corruption and greed condensed into neat stacks of cash, all taken from people who needed it most. "All teams, prepare to execute," Reyes commanded softly into his radio. "Remember, primary objectives are suspect apprehension and evidence preservation. These funds are crucial evidence. Protect those crates." The tactical teams adjusted their gear one final time. Body armor secured, weapons checked, flashbangs ready. The pre-dawn silence felt electric with tension. Execute, execute, execute. The raid exploded into action from all sides. Flash-bang grenades burst through windows in coordinated strikes, filling the warehouse with deafening noise and disorienting light. Agents crashed through doors and loading bays, shouting commands as they swept inside. Through the command vehicle's feeds, Angela watched chaos erupt. The guards recovered quickly from the initial shock, grabbing weapons and taking cover behind crates. Gunfire erupted in sharp bursts, muzzle flashes strobing through the interior. Agents dove for protection as bullets sparked off metal walls. "Multiple armed suspects engaging," came urgent radio calls. "Taking heavy fire near the central storage area." The guards had clearly been chosen for their willingness to fight. They used their knowledge of the warehouse layout to full advantage, firing from elevated positions and through gaps between crates. Agents struggled to advance through the maze-like corridors of shipping containers and storage units. "Watch your left!" Tasha gripped Angela's arm as they saw a guard ambush a federal team from behind a forklift. The agents barely dove clear as bullets tore into nearby crates, sending clouds of shredded bills floating through the air. "They're destroying evidence!" Reyes barked into his radio. "All teams push forward. We cannot let them burn those records." The federal response intensified. More agents poured through the breach points, overwhelming the defenders through sheer numbers and superior training. Flashbangs continued to detonate, the constant percussion mixing with gunfire and shouted commands. Slowly but steadily, the tactical teams gained ground. Guards were forced back from their positions, several dropping their weapons and surrendering when cornered. Others fought desperately to the end, forcing agents to respond with deadly force. Through the chaos, Angela spotted movement on one of the overhead cameras. A side door of the office area burst open, and 2 figures sprinted out. Even through the grainy feed, she recognized Denton's aggressive stride as he shoved past a startled guard, clutching a stuffed duffel bag. "There! Loading dock camera 3!" she pointed urgently. "Denton's making a break for it." Reyes immediately redirected nearby teams to intercept, but the corrupt officer had planned his escape route carefully. He and his partner used the confusion of battle to their advantage, ducking between containers and staying in the shadows. The warehouse had descended into complete mayhem. Agents secured surrendering guards, while others battled pockets of resistance. Stacks of cash lay scattered across the floor, mixing with shell casings and broken glass. The air was thick with gun smoke and the acidic sting of flashbang residue. Through the tactical radio network, Angela heard the teams coordinating to cut off Denton's escape. But the former officer knew every corner of the facility. He and Rourke split up, forcing their pursuers to divide their attention. "Subject heading for Northwest Loading Dock," came an urgent call. "Be advised, he's armed." The camera feeds showed Denton racing between parked delivery trucks, the duffel bag bouncing against his back. Two agents nearly caught him, but were forced to dive for cover when he spun and fired several wild shots in their direction. "He's going to get away," Angela said through clenched teeth, frustrated at being unable to help. Years of stealing from the helpless, and now he might slip through their fingers with one final bag of dirty money. The loading dock cameras showed Denton reaching the exit. He slammed his shoulder into the emergency bar, bursting out into the pre-dawn light. For a moment, he paused to get his bearings in the fog. "All exterior teams converge on Northwest Loading Dock," Reyes commanded. "Do not let him reach the perimeter fence." Angela held her breath as she watched Denton sprint across the parking lot, agents in pursuit. The duffel bag clearly weighed him down, but desperation lent him speed. The perimeter fence was only 50 yards away. Tactical teams emerged from multiple directions, trying to cut off his escape route. But Denton fired backwards wildly as he ran, forcing them to take cover. The fog gave him added concealment as he angled toward a gap between patrol vehicles. Inside the warehouse loading bay, metal chains rattled against support beams as gunfire echoed through the cavernous space. Angela pressed herself against a concrete pillar, heart pounding as bullets sparked off nearby surfaces. The air hung thick with cordite and sweat. "Federal agents! Drop your weapons!" The command boomed across the facility, almost lost in the chaos of combat. Two guards near a forklift returned fire, forcing agents to dive behind shipping crates. Glass shattered overhead as rounds struck the industrial lighting, sending showers of sparks raining down. Angela ducked instinctively as electrical fixtures exploded above her position. "Move up! Don't let them regroup!" Agent Reyes directed tactical teams through the maze of storage units. His voice carried authority even through the din of battle. The federal response was overwhelming but precise. Teams leapfrogged forward in coordinated movements, maintaining steady pressure on the defenders. Guards who tried to change positions found their routes cut off by expertly placed suppressing fire. A massive stack of crates suddenly toppled nearby, sending Angela scrambling backward. Metal containers crashed down like giant dominoes, spilling bundles of cash and documents across the concrete floor. She barely rolled clear as a heavy chain whipped past her head, torn loose by the collapse. "Watch your sectors!" an agent shouted. "They're using the upper catwalks." Through gaps in the falling debris, Angela spotted movement on the elevated walkways. Guards had taken up sniper positions among the roof supports, trying to pin down the federal teams. But their advantage proved short-lived, as tactical units responded with precise shots, forcing them to abandon the high ground. The close-quarters fighting intensified near the center of the warehouse. Agents engaged in hand-to-hand combat with guards who had run out of ammunition. The sound of flesh hitting flesh mixed with grunts of exertion and pain. Training and discipline began to tell as the federal teams systematically subdued their opponents. Angela stayed low but kept moving, trying to maintain sight lines on key areas. Her military family background helped her read the flow of combat. She noticed patterns in the guards' movements, suggesting they were protecting specific storage sections. A burst of automatic fire sent her diving behind a forklift. As she rolled to a crouch, she spotted Rourke trying to slip through a side passage. The corrupt officer carried a black briefcase, likely filled with incriminating documents. "There! Section C7!" she called out to nearby agents. "Rourke's making a break." Two tactical team members immediately pursued. Rourke realized he was spotted and panicked, dropping the briefcase to draw his weapon. But before he could fire, an agent tackled him full force into a stack of empty pallets. The impact sent wooden splinters flying as they crashed through. Rourke fought viciously, landing several solid punches, but his police training was no match for federal close combat expertise. The agent deflected a wild swing and smoothly trapped Rourke's arm in a joint lock. A second team member moved in to help secure the struggling suspect. "Stop resisting!" The agent increased pressure on the hold until Rourke finally went limp, gasping in pain. "You don't understand," Rourke wheezed as they cuffed him. "You have no idea what you're dealing with." The battle continued to rage through other sections of the warehouse. Angela heard Denton shouting orders, his voice moving toward the rear exit. She worked her way closer, staying behind cover as agents engaged the remaining guards. A flash bang detonated nearby, the concussion making her ears ring. Through blurred vision, she saw Denton emerge from behind a shipping container. He clutched a heavy duffel bag and fired his pistol one-handed at pursuing agents. "Don't let him reach that exit," someone shouted. But Denton was moving with desperate speed. He shoulder-checked a guard who got in his way, sending the man sprawling. Bullets sparked off metal surfaces around him as he zigzagged between obstacles. Angela tried to follow his movement, but had to duck as more gunfire erupted overhead. A hanging light fixture exploded, raining glass and sparks. When she looked again, Denton had almost reached the rear loading dock. The corrupt officer slammed through the emergency exit, letting in a blast of pre-dawn air. Agents rushed to pursue, but were forced back by his covering fire. The metal door banged against the wall as Denton disappeared into the fog outside. "He's headed for the truck," an agent called out. "All units converge on the rear lot." Angela moved carefully toward the exit, stepping over debris from the fighting. Most of the guards had been subdued now, with agents securing the scene and beginning to document the massive evidence cache. The sounds of combat were replaced by radio chatter and the metallic clicks of handcuffs. Through the open door, she could see Denton's shadowy figure running across the loading area. The duffel bag bounced awkwardly against his back as he sprinted between parked vehicles. His breath came in ragged gasps, visible in the cool morning air. The former officer was only 30 yards from a pickup truck that likely held more stolen money. If he reached it, he might still escape with millions in criminal proceeds. But as Denton rounded the corner of a delivery van, a tall figure stepped directly into his path. General Whitaker stood perfectly still, his military bearing unmistakable even in civilian clothes. His presence seemed to fill the space between Denton and freedom. The early morning fog hung low over the loading area, creating ghostly shapes in the dim light. Denton skidded to a stop, his boots scraping on wet asphalt, as he found himself face to face with General Whitaker. The stolen duffel bag swung heavily against his back, stuffed with evidence of his crimes. "Step aside," Denton growled, his chest heaving from the sprint. Sweat gleamed on his forehead despite the cool air. The general remained motionless, hands relaxed at his sides. His calm posture contrasted sharply with Denton's ragged desperation. "You know I can't do that, Officer Denton." Denton's eyes darted between the general and the pickup truck, just yards away. Freedom beckoned, but the commanding figure blocked his path. The sound of agents securing the warehouse echoed behind them. "Last warning," Denton snarled. "Move, or I'll make you move." The general's expression didn't change. "You've done enough damage, son. It ends here." With a roar of frustration, Denton dropped the duffel bag and lunged forward. He threw his full weight into a shoulder charge, trying to bulldoze past the older man. But the general pivoted smoothly, redirecting Denton's momentum with practiced efficiency. As Denton stumbled, his hand dropped to his holster. The general's response was lightning fast. Before the weapon cleared leather, Whitaker's grip locked around Denton's wrist. A precise twist sent shocking pain up the officer's arm. The gun clattered to the ground as Denton gasped. He tried to throw a wild left hook, but the general slipped inside his guard. In one fluid motion, Whitaker swept Denton's legs while maintaining control of his arm. The corrupt officer crashed hard onto the asphalt. "Stay down!" the general commanded, keeping the arm lock secure. But Denton refused to submit. He bucked violently, trying to break free. His elbow caught the general's ribs, forcing a grunt. Denton seized the moment to roll away and scramble to his feet. "You don't know what you're dealing with," Denton spat, raising his fists in a boxer's stance. The general settled into a balanced military fighting position. "I know exactly what I'm dealing with. A coward who preys on the innocent." Denton charged in with a flurry of punches. His police combat training showed in the sharp, aggressive combinations, but the general's movements were precise and economical. He deflected the strikes, letting Denton wear himself out. "All that rage," Whitaker observed calmly, "and you still can't touch me." Frustration made Denton sloppy. He overextended on a right cross, and the general capitalized instantly. A quick strike to Denton's solar plexus doubled him over. Before he could recover, Whitaker trapped his arm in a painful joint lock. "Military combat techniques," the general explained, as he forced Denton to his knees, designed to control without causing permanent damage. Denton struggled, but found himself completely immobilized. Every attempt to resist sent fresh waves of pain through his shoulder. The general maintained steady pressure, demonstrating decades of hand-to-hand combat experience. "You're under arrest," Whitaker stated firmly. "Though I suspect you're familiar with the procedure." Agents emerged from the warehouse, weapons trained on Denton as they approached. The former officer's face contorted with hatred and humiliation. He tried one final desperate twist to break free. The general smoothly transitioned to a more secure hold, driving Denton face down onto the asphalt. "That's enough. You've lost." "You don't understand," Denton growled into the pavement. "There are people who won't let this happen." "Those people aren't here," Whitaker replied, "and they can't help you now." Federal agents quickly moved in to secure Denton. The general maintained control until handcuffs clicked into place. Only then did he step back, watching as they hauled the corrupt officer to his feet. Inside the warehouse, the sounds of evidence collection echoed across the loading bay. Agents cataloged crates of financial records and photographed stacks of stolen cash. The full scope of the criminal enterprise was finally exposed. "Sir," an agent approached the general, "we've recovered multiple hard drives and transaction records. The evidence is overwhelming." Whitaker nodded. "Make sure everything is properly documented. This needs to be airtight." More vehicles arrived at the scene, their red and blue lights cutting through the morning mist. The sun was starting to rise, casting long shadows across the parking lot. Denton stood sullenly between two agents, his career and freedom crumbling around him. The duffel bag lay forgotten where it had fallen. An evidence technician carefully opened it, revealing bundles of cash and USB drives. Each item would help build the case against Denton and his conspirators. "You made a mistake," Denton called out as they led him toward a waiting vehicle. "You should have let me go." The general turned to face him. "No, Officer Denton, the mistake was yours. You thought having authority meant you were above the law." Agents guided Denton into the back of an unmarked car. The door slammed with finality, muffling his last bitter protests. Through the window, his defeated expression showed he finally understood. His reign of corruption was over. The warehouse crime scene buzzed with activity as the sun climbed higher. Evidence teams methodically documented years of financial fraud and abuse of power. The general watched the proceedings with quiet satisfaction, knowing justice would finally be served. Camera flashes lit up the packed press briefing room like lightning strikes. Reporters jostled for position, their equipment crowding the aisles as federal investigator Daniel Reyes approached the podium. Behind him, a large screen displayed photographs of evidence recovered from the warehouse raid. Angela sat in the front row beside General Whitaker, her posture straight and dignified. The morning's events had left her exhausted, but determined to see this through. She noticed several bank customers she recognized from previous weeks, others who had faced similar accusations but stayed silent out of fear. "Good afternoon," Reyes began, adjusting the microphone. "What we're about to discuss represents one of the most extensive corruption schemes this department has ever uncovered. Over the past 18 months, officers Kyle Denton and Blake Rourke, in cooperation with bank manager Harold Mills, systematically targeted and falsely accused numerous citizens of financial fraud." The screen behind him switched to surveillance footage, showing Denton confronting various customers inside the bank. Their method was simple, but devastating. They would identify customers attempting to deposit or withdraw significant amounts, particularly from nonprofit organizations. The bank manager would flag these transactions as suspicious, triggering an aggressive police response. Photographs of financial documents appeared next. While the victims were detained or arrested, their accounts would be frozen. During this period, Mills would divert portions of the funds through a complex network of shell accounts. The stolen money was then laundered through various businesses before being stored in warehouses, like the one raided this morning. A reporter raised her hand. "How much money are we talking about?" "Current estimates suggest upwards of $4 million were stolen over the course of the operation," Reyes replied. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. But the true cost goes far beyond monetary damage. These officers deliberately targeted minority customers and non-profit organizations, believing they would be less likely to fight back or have resources to challenge false accusations. Angela felt the general's hand squeeze her shoulder supportively as Reyes continued. "The scheme began to unravel yesterday when they attempted to stop Ms. Angela Brooks from depositing a legitimate $300,000 settlement check for a nonprofit housing project. Unlike previous victims, Ms. Brooks refused to be intimidated. Her resistance, combined with her family connections, brought unprecedented scrutiny to their operation." More photos appeared on the screen. The warehouse interior, crates of documents, stacks of cash being cataloged by evidence technicians. During the subsequent investigation, we discovered detailed records of their criminal enterprise. Officer Denton and Officer Rourke attempted to destroy this evidence during last night's pursuit, but they failed to eliminate digital backups stored in multiple locations. "What charges are being filed?" another reporter called out. Reyes consulted his notes. "Officers Denton and Rourke are being charged with conspiracy to commit bank fraud, money laundering, evidence tampering, civil rights violations, and multiple counts of false arrest. Bank manager Mills faces similar charges related to financial crimes. Additional charges may be added as the investigation continues." The screen showed booking photos of all three men. Their expressions ranged from Denton's barely contained rage to Mills's obvious terror. Both officers have been terminated from the department, and their law enforcement certifications will be permanently revoked. They will never wear a badge again. Angela watched the reporters scribbling frantically in their notebooks. She remembered Denton's smug expression when he'd first confronted her at the bank, how certain he'd been of his power. Now that same arrogance had led to his downfall. "Ms. Brooks," a reporter turned to face her, "how does it feel to know your actions helped expose this conspiracy?" Standing slowly, Angela approached the podium as Reyes stepped aside. "I feel vindicated, but also deeply concerned about how many others suffered in silence before this scheme was exposed. These men didn't just steal money. They stole people's dignity, their sense of security, their faith in the system meant to protect them. The cameras clicked rapidly as she continued. I was fortunate to have resources and support that many victims didn't. That's why it's crucial we use this moment to examine how such abuse was allowed to continue for so long. We need better oversight, stronger accountability, and a commitment to treating every citizen with respect, regardless of their background. Will you be pursuing civil action against the department? Someone asked. My sister Tasha, who is a civil rights attorney, is already preparing class action litigation on behalf of all victims identified in the financial records, Angela replied. But more importantly, we're working to ensure the recovered funds are returned to the nonprofit organizations they were stolen from. Communities were deprived of vital services because of this corruption. Making them whole again is our priority. General Whitaker stood as well, his presence commanding immediate attention. The federal investigation will continue until we've identified every victim and exposed every accomplice. This case demonstrates why we must never stop demanding accountability from those in positions of authority. Reyes returned to the podium with additional photographs. We're releasing these images of recovered documents and asking anyone who may have been victimized by these officers to come forward. A special task force has been established to review all arrests and account freezes initiated by Officers Denton and Rourke during their time with the department. The briefing continued as more details emerged. Dates, locations, amounts stolen, the complex web of accounts used to hide the money. Angela listened intently, finally understanding the full scope of what she had helped uncover. Her simple refusal to be bullied had pulled on a thread that unraveled years of systematic corruption. Reporters continued shouting questions as camera crews broadcast the story live across multiple networks. The truth was spreading rapidly, impossible to contain or control. For everyone who had ever faced similar injustice in silence, this moment represented something powerful. Proof that standing up to abuse of power could actually work. Sunlight sparkled off the golden shovels lined up along the construction site. Angela adjusted her blazer as she watched families gathering on the freshly cleared lot. Children darted between adults, their laughter carrying across the morning air. Construction equipment stood ready nearby, waiting to break ground on what would become homes for 35 families. Tasha approached, carrying a stack of programs for the ceremony. Hard to believe we're finally here, she said, handing Angela one of the glossy brochures. Remember when you first told me about this project? Feels like a lifetime ago, Angela replied, running her finger over the embossed title, Hope Gardens Community Housing Project. Breaking new ground. The image below showed an artist's rendering of the finished development, modern townhomes with small gardens, a community center, and plenty of green space for children to play. More people arrived, filling the rows of chairs set up facing the podium. Angela recognized many faces from the neighborhood meetings where they'd planned this development. Some had been living in overcrowded apartments or spending most of their income on rent. Now they would have a chance at affordable home ownership. General Whitaker stood off to the side, speaking quietly with federal housing officials. He'd traded his military uniform for a sharp civilian suit, but his commanding presence remained unchanged. Several reporters positioned their cameras, preparing to document the ceremony. Ms. Brooks, a young mother, approached with her daughter, both dressed in their Sunday best. I just wanted to thank you for not giving up. When we heard about what happened at the bank, we were scared the whole project would fall apart. Angela smiled warmly. I couldn't let that happen. This community has waited too long for these homes. The little girl tugged at her mother's dress. Is this where our new house will be? That's right, baby, her mother answered. And you'll have your very own room to decorate. The child's eyes lit up. Can I paint it purple? Any color you want, Angela assured her, watching them return to their seats. Moments like this made all the struggle worthwhile. The police department's new community liaison officer arrived, representing the reforms implemented after the corruption scandal. Several bank representatives attended as well, eager to demonstrate their commitment to serving minority communities. The exposure of Mills's scheme had triggered audits at branches across the city. Tasha checked her watch. Almost time. You ready? Angela nodded, straightening her shoulders as she approached the podium. The crowd settled into their seats, a sea of hopeful faces looking back at her. Camera shutters clicked rapidly. "Good morning," she began, her voice carrying clearly across the lot. "Today marks more than just the start of construction. It represents what we can achieve when we refuse to let injustice stand unchallenged." She gestured to the architectural plans displayed on easels. "These homes were almost stolen from you. The same corruption that tried to stop this project had already robbed other communities of millions meant for similar developments. But because people stood up and demanded accountability, those funds have been recovered and returned where they belong. To you." Applause rippled through the audience. Angela continued, "Hope Gardens will provide affordable housing for 35 families. The community center will offer job training programs. The garden plots will help feed our neighbors. But most importantly, this project proves that positive change is possible when we work together." She introduced several speakers, community leaders, housing officials, even one of the federal agents who helped crack the case. Each highlighted different aspects of the project and the reforms it had inspired. The police liaison spoke about new oversight procedures and enhanced training requirements. Bank representatives detailed changes in their fraud detection protocols to prevent racial profiling. Tasha outlined the legal settlement that would help fund similar projects in other neighborhoods. Finally, it was time for the ceremonial groundbreaking. Angela invited the future homeowners to join her, passing out the golden shovels. Children grabbed smaller plastic versions, eager to participate. "On behalf of everyone who helped make this possible," Angela announced, "I invite you to break ground on your new homes." The shovels plunged into the earth as cameras flashed, and the crowd cheered. Parents lifted smaller children to help them dig. Even the construction workers smiled, caught up in the moment's joy. As the ceremony transitioned into a community celebration with food and music, Angela found a quiet moment with her uncle. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything." General Whitaker shook his head. "I just made some phone calls. You're the one who stood your ground when they tried to humiliate you. You're the one who kept fighting when they destroyed evidence. You're the one who insisted on joining the warehouse raid to see justice done. But without your help, without my help, you would have found another way," he interrupted gently. "That's who you are, Angela. That's who your parents raised you to be. The victory belongs to your courage." Angela watched families exploring the construction site, imagining their future homes. Children planted small flags where their bedrooms would be. Parents discussed paint colors and garden plans. The community that had come together to demand justice was now coming together to build something lasting. A local choir began singing as volunteers served food from long tables. The atmosphere felt like a block party mixed with a family reunion. Even the media crews found themselves caught up in the celebration, capturing candid moments of pure joy. Looking over the scene, Angela felt profound gratitude. The injustice meant to silence her had instead amplified voices that needed to be heard. The corruption meant to stop this project had only made the community stronger. These homes would stand as proof that standing up to intimidation could create real change. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like to support my channel and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. On the screen, I have picked 2 special stories just for you. Have a wonderful day.